Hey everyone, Bob here again. So today we are going to take a look at Free People's military victories, which are, as you're probably aware, the least common way to win the game. I think I didn't look at the stats recently, but it's something like 4 or 5% of the wins from last year. So certainly the least common. Shadow Player military victory and Free People's ring victory are the large majority, and then Shadow Player ring victory is like 15%, and then there's Free People's military victory down at 4%, along with conceded wins for both sides. So the most common way that a Free People's military victory happens is from kind of an opportunistic happening on a bad turn from Shadow. So it's also combined. I think the most common is opportunistic combined with Shadow letting Free Peoples get 2 victory points in advance. Sometimes it can happen. I think probably the most common way that Shadow would give up 2 victory points and not really care is, say, this army's walked down here, so Sauron's at war, and they're going for Gondor first, and Gondor's mustered down a step, and you attack Osgiliath, and you get 1 hit, say. So Gondor's at war now, and they choose to retreat here. And then the Shadow army walks in. And then this guy walks into Minas Morgul and goes, haha, I've got 2 points. I'm halfway to winning. And a lot of the time, Shadow players will say, I don't care. Because it's, unlikely you're going to get another 2 points. And, these armies can come step on this guy if they really have to. And they'll probably take those 2 points back if they really need it. And a lot of the time, that is the correct way to play it. I might even say most of the time, because all the moves and attacks it takes to take this back are slowing you down from getting to 10 points, while the Fellowship is probably speeding on their way. So oftentimes it is the correct play to ignore 2 points that are just cheaply grabbed like that. Or another common way to do it is if this army's here, Southerns are at war, and you play Corsairs of Umbar and put Dol Amroth under siege, then the guys from Osgiliath or Pelargir might sneak in there and get another 2 points. Yeah. So sometimes with an opportunistic moment like that, and then Shadow has an apocalyptic turn, where they just roll, where they're in a situation like this, and then they roll 4 eyes and 2 Palantirs or whatever, so they have no musters and no army movement, and then maybe this army comes out and tries to take Moria. Something like that, where you've been given a lead, and then you get that, 1% opportunity to finish it off. Whoopsies. So that's one way to do it. I want to talk about the way that I've gone after it more. So this isn't... I know my vocal tics are worse again, but this is a very unorganized video, so I'm just going to let them slide this time. I have my notes written down here, but it's such a different way of playing the game overall that it's hard for me to present all these ideas in an organized fashion where one point leads into the other. It's kind of just, here's my experience from attempting Free People's military victories and defending against them. So bear with me as I ramble a little bit here. So one way, if let's just reset the board here. Okay. Back to square one. So if a player is trying a Free People's military victory from the start, it will often start with separating pretty much all the companions and sending them to Moria. Because it'll be easy to send Strider down to Gondor, and it'll be easy to send Legolas and Gimli up here to help get their nations to war. I don't actually love this, even as going for a Free People's military win, because I don't need all the nations to be at war. You only really need 2 or 3. So I don't like separating the companions to the far ends of the earth. I like having them in 2 clumps. So what I like doing personally is I send Strider and Boromir and Pippin down to Gondor. So Boromir obviously activates them, and you have his ability to get them to war closer. And Strider, obviously, you want to crown into Aragorn. And I believe you should have 1 hobbit with one of your great armies and 1 hobbit with the other great army. Because since you're not trying to make the Fellowship win, you can use cards like Fateful Strike and Blade of Westernesse to try to kill the Witch King. And that's a really big deal in a Free People's Military attempt, because now the Shadow player can't card cycle, and now they can't, they're down a die every turn. And usually a Free People's Military attempt is going to be a lot slower. So there's just going to be more turns to the game. So every die that you can add to yourself or take away from your opponent is a really big deal. So what I do, so when I reference 2 clumps of companions, so I think the best way to go for it on purpose is to have 2 armies that you slowly muster up and build into a big army, and then you go for your 2 strongholds. So that's why, to me, it makes sense to have 2 clumps of companions. And the way I like to divide them is 2 Captains of the West on each one. So this one has Legolas and Gimli, and this one has Aragorn and Boromir. And because Aragorn is the most powerful of those ones, not only does he provide 2 leadership, but there's also the Andúril card out there, then Gandalf goes with the other party, because he's going to be, Gandalf the White at some point, hopefully. And then he can shine to cancel Nazgul leadership. So he isn't actually providing leadership or an extra die to help with combat. So combat-wise, these 2 are performing about the same, but obviously you have the very powerful Gandalf effect. So that's why I like to separate them into 2 clumps of companions to go with 2 powerful armies to hopefully get 2 strongholds to get your total of 4 points. But I don't usually start out trying to do this on turn 1. This is, it's unlikely to succeed if the Shadow player knows how to play against it, which is why you rarely see the Free People's player start from the gusto, going for a Free People's Military win. So it's much more common to try to move the Fellowship faster. It's also a lot more palatable if you start with a card like, We Prove the Swifter or Fear Fire Foes or Book of Mizarble, and you happen to roll. Let's just roll and see if I get it. This isn't quite that. So we'll pretend we'll cheat a little bit. We'll change this die to a character die. So say you have Fear Fire Foes or Book of Mizarble. This is an amazing turn 1 for crowning Aragorn and then also getting the North to war, which is a great start for if you want to go for a Free People's Military win. It's not a great start in the sense that you bring the North to war, so the Witch King will be brought in much quicker. But at the same time, yeah, crowning Aragorn's still really cool. So if you're going for a military win, I would strongly, crowning Aragorn is a really big deal, because the difference between 5 and 6 dice can be the difference between, that extra muster to get your army stronger before it leaves, or to be able to attack and finish off winning in a turn. So, yeah, very important. But like I said, I don't usually plan on that from turn 1. So separating Strider turn 1. So if I had this, and say I had Fear Fire Foes, I would probably send a Hobbit. So that's 1 die to exit the both of them, and then 1 die to move the both of them. Strider goes down here. Merry goes there. And then Fear Fire Foes, Strider goes to Dol Amroth. Merry goes there and brings the North down to war. And then obviously you crown Aragorn with the Will of the West. Okay. So that's still a reasonable turn 1 start for trying to move the Fellowship at the same time. I don't usually, even if I get that turn 1 start, I'm still not committing 100% to a Free People's Military win. Right now you have 5 dice, and you still have Gandalf the Grey and Fellowship, so that encourages you to cycle character cards, to me anyway, because you don't need the 5th die as badly, so you're okay to hang on to Gandalf a little bit more, and you have 5 dice that are more likely to roll Wills of the West and Palantir, so you're more likely to be able to use his card cycling abilities and maybe get to Wizard Staff so that you can run even faster and be even healthier. So that is a way to play it, and it feels pretty cool, honestly. So when I would pivot to a Free People's Military win is usually, for me, if the Fellowship is about here and it's just absolutely had the crap smacked out of it. So it's just been hit every step, maybe revealed a couple times through Moria, the Balrog got played, Morgul Wound happened, and I'm like it doesn't happen every game, but it happens sometimes, where you're just already at 8 corruption, and it just feels impossible to actually get there. This is the point where I say, abandon ship, let's go for a military win. So at this point, I would then send, hopefully send Boromir and Pippin down there, and send these two thugs out that way. And Gandalf's probably dead and hopefully brought back as Gandalf the White by now. So how I play it from here on out is that, like I said, you want to muster up two big armies, and I think there's three main pools that you want to get it from. I don't recommend getting your army from over here, like from Grey Havens, Rivendell, and the North and Ered Luin, because it simply just takes a long time to bring these armies together to be a meaningful army. Like, yes, they can be pretty strong. Yes, there's that Swords in Eriador, and the dwarves in the north both have decent pools to bring in here that aren't very needed elsewhere. But by the time you get this army together, there's only two real targets. There's Moria or Mount Gundabad, maybe Orthanc, but you're a long ways off from all of them. Rivendell mustering up a little bit and going after one of these two is an option, but it's a bit of a fragile army, and the Elf Force pool, of course, is very vulnerable. It's very small. So that's why I don't typically recommend it. It's an option, of course, but yeah. So out of the three pools that I'd recommend for taking a shot are either the Dew area, which is really risky. I've lost games before from cleaning out Dew, and then they come and scoop up some free points, and they get to 10 points, and I lose. I've also won with pulling from the Dew. I don't want to spoil anything, but check out my Lords of Middle-earth tournament games, where I make a Free People's Military attempt, specifically cleaning out the Dew line, and it gets tight. It's very close anyway. So sending these two over here, obviously there's there and back again. There's Book of Mizarble, there's Legolas's ability and Gimli's ability, and there's a lot of units sitting right here. So if you do manage to get all three of these nations to war, then say you bring everything but a regular, like that's already a decent sized army, and you only have to muster a couple times, with a couple North elites and this leadership, and that's a strong army right there. Like Mount Gundabad should be scared. Dol Guldur certainly threatened. Moria's even threatened a little bit. You can even go to Mordor. Like it's a very flexible spot to put together an army from. So that's one of my favorites. And then Gondor, of course, has a decent sized force pool. And because there's a couple strongholds in Pelargir to be taken, there's potential for sneaking around Shadow a bit. And also, of course, you're right next to Mordor and Umbar. So there's just a lot of different strongholds that you can threaten to go and take. Especially, say you have mustered up a little bit. And, like I said, typically, actually, I'm not sure if I said this or not, but how you want to play this is you want to play it very slow. Like, you want to play it cautious, and you want to make it look like you're still thinking about the Fellowship. So it's really nice if you can park the Fellowship in a spot like Lorien or Minas Tirith along the way and let them heal up for like 4 turns while you're mustering up your armies, while you're getting these two big and strong, so that you do technically still have a shot at a Free People's Military win. And if they think that you're going for a Free People's Military win, they're probably going to start putting in 0 eyes, and there's that chance that they roll 0 eyes and add 0 more, and you roll like 4 movement, and suddenly that's a great shot, and you've got a shot at the Fellowship again. So it's an option anyway. Yeah, all that to say, it's good to try to threaten both victory conditions at the same time, or at least make it look like you still care about the Fellowship, so that they are kind of racing themselves anyway. So like if they're confident that you're just going for a military win, he's going to take his time and marshal out all these armies and make it impossible for Aragorn to do anything. But if if they think that you're still going for a ring victory, then they might be rushing Dew, or they might be rushing, somewhere else to try to get to 10 points first. So anyway, it's what your opponent thinks is very critical. It makes a big difference anyway. Okay, so like I said, you want to try to muster 2 armies, and then parking, you always want to try to leave at least a regular behind in the stronghold, not because it's going to hold out, but just because it makes it more difficult for the Shadow player to get to 10 points the same turn you get to 4 points, right? Because if they get to 10 and you get to 4, they win. That's just how the victory check works in the rules, which I think I really didn't like that when I was a newer player. I thought it should be a tie, because that just feels more fair. But I think that would actually make going for Free People's Military wins almost too easy. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. It would feel dumb anyway to make it... Yeah, just because all they need is 4 points. I don't know. It's weird. I didn't explain most of my thought process very well there, but oh well. So yeah, specifically going after Mordor can be, it's great because there's 3 strongholds, so you can kind of weave around them. So like, say, I don't know, you end up fighting this army, they get weakened and pushed back a little bit, and they're under siege in Minas Morgul. It's easy to forget about the other strongholds as the shadow player, so this army comes back and attacks, and then you can just retreat to Gorgoroth and walk into these strongholds. Like, most shadow players won't give you that, but it's kind of just knowing that all 6 points are out there and you might only need 2 of them is it's easy to win the game because the shadow player got too focused on this stronghold that you were after, and you actually just pivoted and went after a different one. Similarly, I remember one game anyway where I had a pretty big army chilling right about here, and the shadow player did a great job mustering up to defend Moria and Dol Guldur, but I'd rolled just enough attacks to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I put Mount Gundabad under siege and took it that turn and finished winning the game. And it's such a different game when Free Peoples has committed to a military win. It's less of a race. I know I said in my advice for newer players that it's a race, because usually it is, but it's not a race anymore. It is kind of a race, but it's a lot more of a chess match. It's slower, and you really have to think through everything you can do this turn and everything your opponent can do this turn and what they want to do and what they can do. It's a real minefield. So you also need to be aware of all the cards that can come into play. Pits of Mordor and Orcs Multiplying again are obviously great for reinforcing the different Sauron strongholds. So all Sauron strongholds can be mustered into from Pits of Mordor. There's also a couple others that are uniquely more musterable. Like I said, Dol Guldur and Mount Gundabad, because Orcs Multiplying is out there. Moria is, I think, the scene of the most tragic ends to a Free People's military win, because you put it under siege and you're all excited about it. You go a couple rounds and you do some damage to them, and then they play Shadows on the Misty Mountains, and they get to put 2 elites and an Nazgul in there, and your hopes are just cooked. And also there's Durin's Bane out there. So that's a free rolling 3 dice at 4 at you before you even start to roll. And even worse, say you do conquer it, and your army gets weakened significantly. There's also these Isengard settlements right here. So you're all happy with yourself because you have Gandalf protecting it, but then they just, muster up a bunch of wargs and come at you, and suddenly you can't cancel that leadership anymore. Assuming Saruman's in the game anyway. Right, so the third place that I would, just putting this back a little bit, the third place that can be a great spot to draw units from is specifically the combination of Rohan and Lorien. That can be a really good one for putting an army together deceptively quickly, because Rohan, so you have those recruitment cards, right? There's Eomer, Riders of Theoden, and the Red Arrow that all help you muster an elite and a leader. And there's 4 settlements clumped together, so it can be tricky for Shadow to actually pin down Rohan and completely wipe them off the face of the map. And because there's only 1 stronghold for them to defend, and there's all those units out there, it can be quite doable to leave at least a reasonable guard behind and have an army that's still ready to go. The other nice thing is that it's close to Gondor, so you can get, like, those companions can pivot over here and go help them. And Orthanc is right there, so it can be possible, you capitalize on a turn where they don't have a lot of musters or flags, and this army where you weren't sure what it was doing is, just bing, bang, bong the archer, and suddenly, Orthanc is under siege. So Orthanc is an interesting one because it is uniquely strong in that it is well defended right off the start, and Saruman is really good at mustering elites in there. You can use the voice of Saruman. I guess I undid putting Saruman back out. But Saruman's fantastic for, just 1 muster die, bloop, another muster die, bloop, and suddenly that is a really difficult stronghold to attack. And New Powers Rising is out there. That puts another 2 elites in there. But if you can catch it by surprise, it's also uniquely vulnerable because, where's Orthanc? Somewhere. There it is. Because there's also all the Ent cards out there. So if you, Have Gandalf over here. You can play the Ent cards and, 3 at 4 a few times, or you can use them as combat cards, which can also be really devastating. So if you can catch it, preferably, less well defended than 5 elites, it can be a really free, what do you call it? It can be a cheap 2 points if you have Ent cards at the right time, anyway. What else is there? Yeah, so a Rohan army also can head north and join up with the Lorien forces. That's a really strong combo because, look at that. That's just a huge pile of elites right there. So it does leave behind a weak Lorien, but it's a very strong combining of armies. And when you're sitting in Dimril Dale, it's not that easy to get around and get Lorien. Maybe this army can sneak around and get Lorien, but depending on the victory points for both sides, that might be a terrible deal for Shadow. Yeah, because then they're leaving Dol Guldur pretty vulnerable to him. Okay, I'm just going to consult with my notes here. Right, so it makes the other plus side to having 2 clumps of companions like this is it makes Brave Stands and Sudden Strikes very powerful. So Brave Stands, assuming that this Hobbit wasn't playing Fear Fire Foes and he's over here, your Brave Stands can do just a lot. They can nerf the Shadow player down to rolling 1 die or rolling 2 dice, or they can... or Sudden Strikes can make a huge difference. Charge, like for Círdan's ships or Guards of the Citadel, that's the combat effect. Since you're stacking a big pile of elites like that, getting a free extra 5 dice before the combat even starts can also be game-changing. Círdan's ships, of course, is also really good for mustering a surprise large army in Pelargir and marching off to get Moria or Umbar. Right. So another huge point is these Elven Rings their value goes up even more because they give Shadow that flexibility because, say you're taking your time, you're mustering up and you're waiting for that bad turn so that you can quick pounce on Mount Gundabad or boogie around Mordor. If Shadow has a ring, that makes their bad turns a lot less bad because they can take one of those useless Palantirs and still muster in a troll in the stronghold you're coming for. So if you don't give the Shadow player any rings, that also might be the difference between them not having that one last attack to retake a stronghold. So if you can avoid giving them a ring at all costs, that's pretty pivotal in the Free People's Military Wind. I also highly recommend not letting companions get besieged. I remember one game, I had conquered Umbar. No, not I. I was the Shadow player in this game. They had conquered Umbar. And they had done it with, I don't remember what the army actually looked like, but they had pretty much all the companions in there. And you'd best believe I was bringing everything in the kitchen sink to try to kill it. It was really strong there in Umbar. It was a bigger army than that. But unless he finds a way to get another 2 points, the game is pretty much over at this point. Because if I do kill that, not only are you, back down to 0 points, but you're down to 4 dice too. And the Fellowship was in a similar spot. It was in Lorien and in not great health. So if you can keep those armies just out here roaming around somewhere in Gondor, north of Mordor, just if they're out there and the Shadow player doesn't know where they're going to go or what they can do, then they're terrifying and they're an absolute nightmare for them to try to deal with. But if they're locked up, they're under siege in Free People's or Shadow Stronghold, then the Shadow player knows that they can't get out without at least paying a very heavy price first, because to get out past this army is probably going to cost the Free Peoples a lot of health. And it's risky, of course. What if you lose? Then you just, you gave away Aragorn and Gandalf's lives for nothing. Okay. Okay, that's pretty much most of what I had written down. There is a lot of room for study and debate on this because, like I said, it's a different game entirely once the Free Peoples commits to going for a military win. So that's most of the advice that comes to mind for me. I've had some success going with Free People's military wins, but it's also very easy for it to go wrong in a hurry. Let me know what you think, or if you have any thoughts on what players ought to do for a Free People's military win. Thanks for watching. See you next time.